Just taking a moment for the YouTube to boot up. Okay, we are ready to go.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the special committee of the whole budget meeting for March 9, 2021 for the town of Gibsons. I acknowledge we are meeting today on the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. We have an agenda to get through, followed by a closed meeting or ending camera meeting, which will be going immediately into after this meeting. So if everybody's ready, we will proceed. We have all of council with us, Councillor Kroll, Councillor D'Andrade, Councillor Lumley, Councillor Ladwig, and myself, Mayor Beamish. I'd like to first of all call to order, and the time I've got, it looks like about 3:05 p.m. And we have an agenda. Could I have approval of the agenda, please? Councillor Kroll, thank you. Councillor Ladwig, thank you. And all in favor? Thank you very much. We have an agenda. We're going to go directly to the Director of Finance. First of all, could I have a motion to receive all of the reports on the agenda today? Councillor D'Andrade, Councillor Lumley, thank you very much. All in favor of receipt? Thank you. Okay, so we have an agenda, we have reports. We'll go to the Director of Finance because it looks like she's going to be front and center for the whole afternoon. So, Director of Finance, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All right, so we'll start with the first one, the 2021 General Operations Budget Update number 1. So the purpose of this report is to provide the committee with an update on the projected general operating surplus as a result of changes made since the February 23rd committee meeting, and also get some council or committee direction on several items as well. So if you remember, the preliminary budget presented on the February 23rd meeting reflected a 2% tax increase and a projected surplus of just over $152,000. Several adjustments were made since that meeting, and I've listed them on the first page of my report there. And as a result, the revised projected surplus is gone up, which is good. It's just over $170,000 now. And this is to cover the capital and projects plan that will be presented on March 16th. Also, new staffing requests, additional considerations by council as well. And so page 2 of the report, there's some outstanding items that I'm looking for direction on. 1 and 2 I'll cover as part of this report. Items 3 through 6 each have their own separate reports, so the committee can deal with those later on in the agenda. So I'm going to circle back to number 1 and 2. So number 1 is the amount of funding to be allocated to the Gibsons Seniors Society line item that was left open as of last meeting. And so since then, we have received a formal funding request from the society for the new freezer, and that's part of the agenda package attached. Since then, they've also been awarded $1,000 under the COVID-19 community grant. And so the remaining request that's outstanding is just over $5,000 for the freezer. And item number 2, that item was relating to the motion that council made last year to provide children's support as a line item in the budget. And so I wanted to bring that to your attention today, because at the last meeting, there was a question about what type of support the committee might want to provide, and then also determination of how much you'd want to allocate to that. So I'm going to turn it back over to the committee, and those are the 2 items ideally I can get direction on today if possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And you'll recall, Council, that we did move, I believe, to incorporate the seniors as a line item. We just haven't assigned any funds to that line in the budget itself. So, Councillor Kroll.
Just for clarification, as I recall, what we had intended to put in the budget was a line item for seniors projects in the community, that it wasn't specifically the Gibson Seniors Society.
That's correct.
Okay, just for clarification on that.
No. Let me change that. It was intended for the Gibson Senior Society, with a recognition that other seniors groups and organizations could apply under our grants of assistance for grants. So no, it was intended to be a line item for the Gibson Senior Society.
Correct, if I may jump in there, Mayor, and that was my apologies. I did add a bit of confusion at the last meeting, and I did look at the council motion previously, and it was very specific that the Gibson Senior Society be added as a line item, which is why we went back to that. And again, my apologies for adding confusion to that one.
That's fine. And we didn't at the time ascribe any amount to that, did we, Director?
That's right. No amount, just that it was specific to the society. And the intent, of course, is to support the seniors.
I'm going to look to Councilor D'Andrade, who's our senior liaison on that for recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What I think it's a good approach this year. I obviously am very supportive of providing this specific amount for them because they, due to COVID, they had to have this approach for their meal program. And I think it's an approach that's serving many, not only members of the society. Well, they have to become members for a $20 fee, but they're having meals with very affordable price, good meals. And I think, so for this year, I would do, and next, I will do this specific amount, and next year, we see, right, how the situation is. I know this year we have, this year we have specific COVID fund. So I would like this year to be this amount, and next year we can discuss if it's possible.
Your recommendation is that we add $5,045 to the budget for the Gibson Senior Society this year, and make it specifically for the cost of the new freezer, to offset the cost of the new freezer?
I think, yeah, because they need, right? That's exactly the amount they spent, yeah.
Do I have a seconder for that? Before go on, Councilor Crowe, anyone wish to second that motion to get on the table for discussion? I will second it. Okay, so it's seconded. So now it's open for discussion. Councilor Crowe?
I still, I'm a little confused because I thought we were going to put money out for funding seniors activities within the community, and fine, the Gibson Senior Society wanted to apply for the money, which they've done, and I'm certainly willing to support them, but I think we're saying that the funding for seniors is specifically for this one group, and I think it should be broader to seniors, or we add a second line for seniors projects in the community, because there are other groups that work with seniors, and I think we can't just fund one isolated group. Seniors is a title, but the Gibson Senior Society is a specific group, and
Gibson's Public Art Gallery is a specific group too, sort of thing, but there are artists in the community. So I think that what we did last year is that we did pass a resolution to add Gibson Senior Society as a line item. And then we recognized last week when we talked about it that there are other organizations that apply from time to time for grants of assistance for seniors projects, and they're project specific as opposed to line items. And that the interesting thing on that will be that they will not be competing any longer with the Gibson Senior Society, because that's what we found in the first year when we looked at this. That so for example, the seniors group out of Seashell that recognize that serves the whole coast, they often come forward with a grant of assistance application, and but it's specific to an activity or a project they're working on, and we look at that in that context. I'm comfortable with what we've done, and what we said, consistent with what we said last year. So I'm comfortable with that.
so in future moving forward, any seniors projects that came forward, they would just be referred to grant and aid?
Grant and aid, and both in March and September. Yeah.
Okay. I would also suggest to Councillor D'Andrade as the liaison to the seniors group that they approach the regional district, because I know for a fact they're members of the Gibson Senior Society from Area E, Area F, and Area D. So it might not hurt for them to reach out to the RD for funding as well.
Yeah, or to the specific directors in the RD, because they have discretionary funds that they can provide. Yeah, exactly. Other discussion, Councillor Ladwig, I think I saw your hand up.
Just a question with regard to their request for the full cost of the freezer. So just so I'm clear, are we thinking that we paid for that through the COVID relief fund? Is that what we're?
No, this would come from taxation.
From taxation.
or surplus. It comes now, it actually reduces surplus is where it lies. Right.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it.
Councillor Lumley?
I think, yeah, I think basically you have to make a decision as a council whether if you put something on a line item on a budget, at that point you don't like who cares? So specifically saying it's for a freezer. I mean, I looked at the original request. I mean, they're buying the Cadillac double door stainless. As a person who's bought tons of restaurant equipment in my life, I mean, they're spending as much as they can on this freezer. And traditionally, when I built my businesses, I spent the least amount I could for the best quality. So I think part of me thinks, like even looking at it, part of me thinks, okay, well, we don't know who's in charge of their finances, but it kind of scares me in one instance. I would almost say just put 5,000 on a line item every year if that's what you want to do, and then whatever they want to do with it, they do with it. But part of me is afraid that they're going to come back to council at some point and go, oh, geez, we need this for this, or we need this for this. I mean, I'm a little afraid, but I mean, you could see what happens. I have no problem helping seniors with a certain amount of financing. But again, my fear is that, you know, they're going to attach this, and we are attaching this to one specific item. I would just like to say, you're on it for 5,000, and you guys get to decide what you do with that 5,000. If you want to blow it all in a freezer, it's kind of like, you know, when your parents give you your allowance. It's just like, hey, don't come crying back to me if you blow it all on candy, you know? So anyway, that's just what my 2 cents there.
I think that makes those are good sense. Yeah, appreciate that. Councillor Ludwig?
I just wanted to say that I support Councillor Lumley's suggestion there. I was a little confused with how we're laying this out, but the way Councillor Lumley just described it as a line item for 5,000, I think that's a good approach. And I think considering the demographic in our community, we've got a lot of seniors here. I like that approach.
I think that's what I interpreted for Councillor D'Andrade was saying, that for this year, let's do the 5,045, which is just over the 5,000, but it clears off that cost. And then for next year, you know, 5,000. I think 5,000 line item is fine. Yeah, in my view. And considering we got 14,000 for fireworks as a line item, so yeah, I think the seniors are more important. So. Councillor D'Andrade?
Okay, so just a clarification. So are we also making a decision for next year that this will be a line item for 5,000, at least for a while, for maybe for the next 3-4 years, or is it something that we are also doing right now?
Would you like to add that to your recommendation?
Yes, yeah, and then next year, it seems that council has a consensus on this. The demographics, yeah, they are pretty much 50%, and they do provide service. And given that other senior organizations still have the capability of applying, I think it's fair. And who knows what happens in 3-4 years? They are getting charitable status. I know this is gonna take them to another level, so I think it's fair.
Yeah, it's a secondary. I would agree to that change as well. So we add this year, we provide them $5,045 to offset the cost of the freezer. Ongoing, we make it $5,000 even as a line item on the budget for the Gibson Senior Society. Councillor Kroll?
Oops, just to keep it clean, would it be better just to give them 5,000 and give them 1,045 out of the COVID fund? They're already getting 1,000 out of the COVID fund. If we pay them 1,045 and then we just keep it consistent 5,000 a year.
I guess the only thing we have said is that the COVID fund is only $1,000. So that I think this is fine. This works. If everybody agrees with this, let me call the question. All in favor? Yeah. No opposed. So thank you. That passes. So thank you, Councillor D'Andrade. You could pass that on to the society when you get a minute. The next one is, provided children associated funding allocation. This is a little bit less clear to me. It's not attached to anything. We often get applications for grants of assistance for programs that focus on children, but how are we doing differently with this? So, Councillor Ladwig, yeah.
Our CAO was kind enough to remind us of why this was on our agenda from last year. And again, I probably won't summarize it as well as he does, but I think, we were talking about how there's a lack of play equipment in town and a lack of infrastructure for children. And so we did, on our last discussion about this, talk about, or I brought it up anyway, whether this funds, whether it be 2,000 or something a year, be set aside for parks and recreation to use, as opposed to having people applying for it, but have it very clearly set aside for this to go towards supporting children's infrastructure. Because people don't necessarily apply for children's infrastructure. So anyways, I just wanted to table that again for this discussion today.
Do you have a specific recommendation or number in mind that you want to put out for a recommendation? I see the Director of Infrastructure has perked up here. So Mr. Newman, I'll invite you to speak.
And yeah, I win because Councillor Ladwig left her thing on mute. So one of the things that we've taken away from that discussion is a recognition that some of our play areas could be more accessible. And I'm not completely sure that this ties in exactly with what you're talking about, but I just thought I would let you know. So when we present our general budget to you, or the draft of the general budget to you for consideration, in 2022, we're proposing the Parks Master Plan, and then in 2023, 4, and 5, that some monies be set aside to upgrade our playground equipment and make it more accessible. We also have a grant application in right now, which we're cautiously optimistic of receiving. And that is for some additional bike and pedestrian routes, which actually would serve, perhaps not in the way you envision, but would serve active transportation to and from schools. So just wanted to give you that bit of information, if that has any relevance to you at this point.
Councillor Crowell?
In light of the cost of playground equipment and its maintenance, would it be, here we go, tax dollars, but, do something comparable to seniors that, an amount in the budget is sort of proportional to the children's group, and that it either could be spent or accrued for future projects like, Armour's Beach, the number of children that use that facility, and over time it's going to require additional maintenance and one thing and another, and there may not be other funding for it. Dougal Park, some of the other playground areas, Brothers Park. So, I hate doing anything that's going to push the taxpayers' amounts up, but, I'd be prepared to make an amount proportional to what's being paid towards seniors, towards children. Currently the demographic in the community is people my age and your age, sir. But, we have 2 members on council who have young children, and I think we need to look to, the future of the community and their needs.
Councillor Ludwig?
Yeah, I support the direction that Councillor Crowell's going in there. I just wanted to say that, and I don't know if we can put caveats around this, but I would caution that I would hate to see this just get sucked up into maintenance. Like, this to me is about getting additional play equipment and recreational infrastructure for children in new locations around town, in my opinion. I don't, like, right now for my children, we have to walk all the way to Dougal Park for us to go on a swing. Not that that's too far, but you know, it's still a ways for families that are trying to walk around and play on something. There was dreams and plans of putting some infrastructure into Weingarten Park at one time. I was part of the Weingarten Park revitalization committee, but that's sitting there kind of stagnant at the moment. And so, you know, I would like to see additional infrastructure around our community where people can walk from their homes and have it more accessible in that way. So,
Mr. Newman?
And I believe that some of those goals that you're talking about, Councillor Ladwig, would be addressed in the Parks Master Plan, which is kind of what we wanted to do. Is we wanted to say, okay, these are all the needs in parks, and where council would like to focus their priorities and funds. And as Councillor Kroll pointed out, play equipment is extremely expensive. You know, you don't get much for $10,000. Regardless, if council, and this would be the director of finance would have to speak to this, but is to be, you know, starting to set aside a nest egg, so to speak, for that sort of infrastructure, then as I say, the director of finance would have to speak to that.
Yeah, it sounds very much like what you want to actually establish as a reserve for parks and playground equipment, and so that and then put money into it every year, or a consistent amount, whether it's used or not, it still builds up. And it sounds like, yeah, Councillor Lumley. I'm sorry.
Why wouldn't we attach a part of our amenities ask on future development to it as well?
You can, yeah. Yeah.
It's just a thought.
Councillor Dindrad?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, that's what I was a little bit of concern, because I think when you set up a funding for kids, like $2,000 not go anywhere, $5,000 might not go anywhere. So I see two different things. One is still to have a funding, for example, 2,000, perhaps some group that would like to do some activity with kids during summer or something can apply, but make a priority, like every year or every 2 years, to have an investment. And I think that would make sense, because I don't think $5,000, or if we put $5,000 in 3 years, we're going to have $15,000 that we wait in 3 years to make an investment. So I would feel more like in the direction of looking at what the master plan for parks and choosing a priority for kids, for example, for 2021 or for 2022, and perhaps this is going to be $20,000 or more. So that's my concern of making a fund that's going to take a long time to pick it up. So I would still maintain like some funding for kids activity, and still focusing in prioritizing some activities for.
If I'm not mistaken, our grants of assistance policy does prioritize those kinds of activities. So we always get applications within that for, to say, duck pluck, deer crossing the art farm. There are lots of programs come forward that are kid focused in those programs. So that, and we have funded them in the past. And in fact, taking seniors out enables us to have more funding for other activities. Councillor Kroll?
I sort of hear what Councillor Dendretti is saying, but you know, if we decide, you know, someone donates a piece of land for park, and now all of a sudden we're faced with wanting to put infrastructure in it, and it's going to come after taxation, it's going to be a big hit in 1 year. I think, you know, little increments are less painful to deal with. You know, we've got some big ticket items coming down the road at us, and I think if we can, you know, set aside $5,000 a year for infrastructure for children's play equipment, great. If a project comes along and we can get an amenity contribution, so be it. But, you know, I think most of the big ships where big amenity contributions are going to be coming forward have already sailed. And I think we need to be proactive in creating a nest egg. And, you know, I would be prepared to make a motion that we create a line item for specifically infrastructure for children's playgrounds in the amount of 5,000.
Create a line item or a reserve. I mean, the.
Well, a line item annually to go towards the reserve to,
Yeah, okay. Like when I hear what you're saying. Councillor Ludwig, seconded, okay. And the advantage of having a reserve is that when an opportunity comes along, like a grant, you have your matching amount or your 1/3 amount or whatever. You're building that up now so that you have that opportunity to say to whoever the grantor is that we have our share and can you give us your share? And so that's the advantage of having a reserve that it doesn't automatically roll over into surplus every year if it's not spent. So, Director of Finance, does that make sense to you to establish a reserve specifically for children's playground equipment and that can we track that?
Yes, yeah, I'm just making some notes. And so I'll have to do a bit of research. It may need a formal reserve if you want to make it. There's a couple options. Some reserves we have sort of there as sort of a subset of the accumulated surplus, and it goes in there. If you want to really formalize it, we could I could bring back a reserve bylaw that formalizes it that way.
We'll take your guidance on that, Councillor Kroll.
just a question. If funds go into reserves and it's, I'm assuming that all the reserves just go into one big pot and they're broken down into sort of line items within that big pot. So the money that's in the pot gets interest.
Yes, and we have a variety of reserves, and most of them are quite separate to each other. There is one area where we have sort of smallish carryover amounts that are operational in nature that basically I take the money to go from current year, put it in the reserve and then bring it back. It's the reserve for future expenditures. And those ones, there's combined mini projects in there. But for something like this, it would be a separate reserve on its own. And yes, reserves do get interest for sure.
So we have a motion on the floor. Councillor Diandrad.
I was just wondering, on behalf of negotiating for kids, is it when mandatory contribution comes, can as part of this policy, can you also put extra money if there's an opportunity, or something? Is it flexible?
Always possible. Every year we're going to deal with a surplus, and you can put so much over into different things if you choose.
Okay, so that's good.
It also allows people to donate specifically to an area.
Oh, that's great. Okay.
Okay, so remind me the specifics of what we're voting on. We are voting to create a reserve specifically for.
In a line.
Yeah, for create a reserve for park infrastructure. Is that what we were talking about?
Kids.
Yeah.
We're creating a line item in our budget to have $5,000 allocated towards a children's playground equipment and infrastructure reserve.
Okay, for a reserve. Okay, yeah, good. Okay, all in favor? Thank you very much. That passes. Okay, so that's all we had to deal with those three items on that list, because the others will come back to us in reports to follow. Okay. So you'll have also do you have any questions around the general budget that's attached there and the numbers, information? And then we have the seniors Harmony Hall requests, the great looking freezer. So we'll go over the staff report now on the 2021 budget new staffing request, and again to the Director of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, so the purpose of this report is to provide information on current staffing levels and submit a request for new staffing. So I've attached the 2021 staffing plan, and this provides an overview of the budgeting staffing levels for the town. The overall proposed change or requested change for as compared to last year's budget is an increase of 0.42 full-time equivalent position, and it would increase to a 1.0 full-time equivalent in 2022, so a full-time position. The request is for a new manager of corporate services position, and again, full-time. And as this position is part of the admin department, I'm going to turn at this point over to the Director of Corporate Services to provide some supporting information on why we're making this request at this time.
So, Council, currently, much of my time is spent doing IT support and managing a variety of staffing level issues. And it means there isn't a lot of time left for the actual legislative services type of work that needs to be done. Usually legislative duties would include, even though it's not limited to, if you see the list there at page 2, ensuring meetings are run in accordance with legislative requirements, that resolutions are properly adopted, subsequent actions are tracked, providing legislative support to town departments, processing of requests under Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, overseeing the records management, drafting of bylaws, policies, and procedures, signing of contracts, lease administration, etc. So right now, in addition to doing those things, there's day-to-day office management and IT responsibilities such as new phones and monitoring equipment and signing out of equipment, and a variety of other tasks that just come through on a day-to-day basis. And we would like to see that those two separated so that there is a new manager of corporate services that would oversee the day-to-day operations, similar to an office administrator, by creating and maintaining administrative systems and processes on a day-to-day basis, and take care of the IT services and those types of requests that come through my office right now. That's usually how it's divided, and I think it would be a good move, and it would make it possible for me to do some things that I am stretched really hard to do right now.
Okay, council discussion. Councilor Crowell, I saw your hand.
I certainly, our CEO who was off on maternity leave, I know what she was going through, and certainly, as the acting CEO was saying, it's it's a incredibly challenging job, and I think what is happening is, certain people have certain skills, and we're dealing with, not always having the right skill set. We have a great person who's in the current position dealing with legislative issues and governance issues, which I think is really important. And the efficiency is being lost with all these other tasks that are being put on. So I'm certainly, I certainly appreciate the need for what's being asked for. And
Thank you. Councilor Lumley?
Yeah, I think I'd like to see some more, I don't know, maybe some comparatives for, like-sized municipalities and so on and so forth. I mean, I tried looking them up, but I was not very successful. I mean, just the way their websites and so on and so forth were situated. But I find it, I don't know, we've got a director of corporate services. Now we're going to have a manager of corporate services, but we don't have an employee of corporate services. So, and this IT thing, it's been going on for years, like even before this council. Like a suggestion I might have is to bring back to council, like obviously I'm not going to vote in favor of this today, but to bring back to council another alternative. Like, I mean, if there's 3 girls at the front, I mean, Tracy does a lot of work right now. Like, I don't know, give her a raise, ask her to oversee that part of the function of the town hall, and then look at maybe having an outside contractor do IT. I'm sure it goes in waves where the IT is going to be like a tremendous burden for periods of time, and then where the IT isn't, right? So I wonder if looking at an outside contract would be maybe a little bit wiser use of our money over the long run than just simply adding more staff to our army of staff. So I don't know. Those are just my thoughts. I just like to kind of see some comparatives and get some more info before I made a decision.
Councillor Ludwig?
Yeah, I was wondering if someone could walk me through the table, the staffing plan table in this report. It's kind of to Councillor Lumley's train of thought a little bit. So who does Tracy and those folks report to right now?
Report to Rebecca.
They do. So how many direct reports do you have, Rebecca, at
I
present?
have 11. The ICBC staff report to me: Tracy, Marcy, Lisa Howard, Tamara, and Elizabeth.
Right, okay. Well,
Pretty big.
what's that?
It's pretty big load for one report, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I just wanted to understand the structure better. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Diendrad.
Yeah, I would like to understand first a clarification, because it says it's an increase of 0.42 full-time, but there is a full-time position for one. So it seems that we are just increasing someone that is already there, another 0.4. Is it what it is?
No, it's for the balance of this year. By the time it's hired,
Oh, so we'll be a full-time person.
it'll be a full-time person in the future. That's correct, yeah. One of the challenges that I have seen, observed here in the position that Rebecca is now sitting in, and Lindsay before her, is managing not only the staff, but the workload of the corporate officer, particularly around things like FOI requests. That can be nothing one day, and it can be 3 FOI requests the next day, sort of thing. The other is, and where we recognize we have a problem, is correspondence tracking and looking after correspondence and ensuring as well that it's received, acknowledged, and responded to, and tracked through the system. Some of those areas there, I'd like to ensure that is added to that workload. But I think that I have seen it, particularly with Lindsay, a lot of stress in that position, a lot of workload in that position, because the other ones have specific job duties. They're at the front counter, they're at ICBC, they're communications, they're doing other specific things. So there's nobody to take off that extra workload of tracking correspondence or looking after the bylaws, preparing the bylaws for council, preparing all of the legal documents that I sign on a regular basis, sort of thing. So that's where I see the need, is to have help in that particular area, as well as mentioned here, taking a supervisory role on with respect to some of those positions. Councillor Kroll, or sorry, Councillor Diendrad, then Councillor Kroll.
Thank you, Mayor. This report talks about they had a conducting a need assessment, right? Which is it's a kind of a performance, internal performance. But what I would like to have, if possible, it's a performance auditing, because to me it strikes me that a town of 5,000 people, there's so much FOI for I think almost a decade now. So that has to be looked at. Unless there's a comparison that every city of $5,000 and a 10,000, there's something, it seems to me there's a lot of FOI, and there has to be a reason for that. So these are the kind of review that I would like, if possible, to be performed, because there has to be a reason why.
That's, yeah. Okay, Councillor Kroll and then Councillor Ludwig.
I believe earlier this year, or was it late last year, the previous CEO gave us a report on just how many FOIs that she'd had to deal with. I think, back to Councillor Lumley's thing, personally, I don't know exactly where we stand compared to other communities and what their staff structuring is. I know, there's, when you look at, up on the coast, there seems to be a lot of people in jobs within the municipality and the regional district. And I'm just wondering, to the IT issue, is like I know the regional district has a huge IT department. And I don't know, I know we have some services that we share with the regional district. Is IT possibly one of them?
Yeah, corporate officer.
We do have an IT consulting firm. We use Cloud9 for our IT consulting, but they are offsite. They come on site 1 day a week and we store up our questions for them. The go-between is me usually, though if it can, we get someone else to take it on. For example, I was able to delegate a lot of the work with the installation of the new phone system to Tamara. So, but it does require that someone here be that go-between, and it appears it's been the pattern. And Lindsay was very good at this. She was quick, and that was her role. And so I've inherited that as well.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, just a comment on the FOIs. Unfortunately, it's not that we have a large number of FOIs. We have a number of large FOIs, and it's a small number of people that consume most of the time and have so for many years. But those things are, most of those, or a lot of those, are several thousand pages long, and we're dealing with people's privacy. So it's not just something you can just make photocopies and they can pick it up later. It takes a lot of work. But anyway, that's just
And the other aspect of this as well is if we had somebody trained in that position, we would not have to hire a acting corporate officer when the corporate officer is not available, because they would be in-house as opposed to engaging somebody from out-house. So there's a number of, I actually think it's a needed position. I just encouraged Lindsay quite a long time ago. She just said, you need help. I mean, you can't keep on taking on the stress. You just need help, and trying to find a way to do that. So, Councillor Ladwig, I think she just beat you, Councillor Diendrad. Yeah.
Yeah, like just with regard to the IT thing, I see the need for it as well. I think you have that many direct reports, things are going to slip through the cracks, and so yeah, I think it's a reasonable request. It doesn't, I'm still confused as to how this solves our IT issue. Are we going to make the manager now our IT go-to person? Like, this shouldn't, IT and this person shouldn't, there should be no IT, in my opinion, associated with either of these positions. These are not, managers don't, unless you're the manager of IT, you shouldn't be doing IT work. So I'm still confused about the IT thing.
Rebecca, CEO, yeah, good.
let me just have a go at it first. I think the IT, it's a work in progress. We can't do anything without IT, as you know, even more so. It really proved its worth the last couple of years. The town was primarily operating on home type computers and including internet. So since about 2015, we've been updating, and we're still in that schedule. So that the IT is just that being the connection person, and somebody has to make decisions like bringing budget requests forward. People have requests, and when something is broken down, I can't get into my computer is one thing. That's where the IT support comes in. But everything else goes through the corporate officer's office. And the other thing that happens is we don't have much support. Like, I've never had any clerical support to speak of, neither has the corporate officer, or we have limited ability even to support council. If you have a meeting, like we do, the meeting to set up, the coffee to take down, send out the invites, clean up, send out the thank you letters, it's all the same people. Like my colleagues, they don't even book their own meetings. Like, we're very thin on admin, and that's been the problem. We hire a corporate officer and they get overwhelmed with the day-to-day, and you can never get to archiving, to policy work, bylaws, preparing contracts, all of that work. We're barely hanging on, and a lot of it doesn't get done. So we have boxes of files to put away, but you need to, you can't just stash it in a file. You don't have a lot of support, and we appreciate it is challenging we'll just keep doing what we've been doing till now, because, it's a difficult year and, it's tight budgets for everyone, but, so that's what our ask was for.
Councillor,
I'm sorry.
sorry.
Well, I was just gonna say, I totally understand everything that CEO just said, and I support it and I see it. I just haven't addressed the IT thing. I just don't think I think we should have some other person in the group trained in IT to be the go-to person. I don't think it's a corporate officer or manager role. And so it's just something to think about as we move forward, that I hire a high school kid that's good on computers, I don't know, or get them to come, I don't know, but you know what I'm saying? It just, to me, doesn't seem like the two should overlap, but anyway.
Councillor Andrade, then Councillor Lumley, then I'll say something.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I understand that the town, they had come forward with a lot of change, which under their own understanding, it has an enhanced performance. But I wonder, sometimes we need just an external party. Has the town of Gibson ever gone through like a review from like a Ernst & Young, companies like that specialized in efficiency? Is there anything that has been done?
I'm not aware of it, CEO.
I think, putting words in your mouth, but I don't wonder if you're referring to as like a service review. That's sometimes what those companies are hired for. We haven't had anything along those lines. We've had reviews of sort of from a work and capacity perspective on some departments. I think the practice was the last time we looked at something like that, and that was back in 2015 or so.
So sorry, can you clarify what did you have in 2015? Sorry.
It's an HR report on, and we had a couple of just on the capacity to provide service where we had enough staff and so on. Yeah. Specifically for engineering and public works and parks.
Councillor Lumley.
Yeah, I don't know, I'll just reiterate that maybe more information, or maybe if we get so many FOI requests, maybe we're doing something wrong. I don't know. I mean, anyway, I'm it's not like I want staff to suffer or be overworked or anything, but I mean, during COVID, we've spent $350,000 on equipment, new phone system. We're expanding our offices. I mean, now we're going to start hiring people. It makes me uncomfortable. I mean, I don't know what else to say. It's just, I don't know. Maybe there's a better way of looking at, it's almost like Councillor DeAndre, like maybe somebody else can come in and go, hey, like you're wasting so much time having someone deal with IT, or maybe we have the wrong IT company. Maybe Cloud9, if it's costing so much time in IT, then we need a new IT company. Like, what are they not doing their job? Like, I mean, if I hired someone to work the system at the restaurant, I hope it wouldn't take up much of my time, because that's what I hired them for. So that's just my feeling. So more information, maybe some comparatives before I can like logically make a decision. I mean, someone just came to me and said, hey, we need somebody. I just like to have a little bit more information. That's all. I'm not saying it's not right or wrong, but I'm just saying that I just don't have enough to go by at this time. That's all.
I think the IT is a bit of a red herring in all of this. I think the role of the corporate officer in IT is to be the person who relays the messages on that to the IT company once a week, or if something goes wrong, to contact the IT company to get them to act. The other role of IT, and if you sit in a regional district meeting, you have their IT people in that meeting controlling the screen and controlling the people in and out of delegations and things like that. That's not done by the corporate officer trying to keep track of the meeting and the agenda. That's done by the IT staff who are there as well, doing that for the 7 members of the board who are sitting there. So that, but I think that we're not looking for Rebecca to be an IT specialist. Now, that being said, Lindsay knew more and took on more in the role of IT. And she organized the offsite computers and assigned them and did all of that sort of thing. That's a role that she chose to take on. And if I had problems with my cell phone in terms of getting it connected, she would come in and she would set my cell phone up for me, because she knows how to do that. And she's a whiz at it, and not all of us are. So I think the IT is a bit of a red herring in the conversation. We have a contract service that comes in once a week to look after our IT needs. So I'm just seeing it as just general workload. Anything you ask for, including the current correspondence review, is going to be done by Rebecca, and including the next bylaw you ask for, bylaw amendment review, is going to be done also by the corporate officer. Whereas in many organizations, they have somebody that the corporate officer can rely on to they can either do that, but they can also have other duties that they are doing be done by somebody else. So, Councillor Kroll?
Case in point, I think I saw 3 emails today requesting reports, and it's Rebecca that's going to have to do those reports. And, you know, the suggestion that they be done in a timely manner. You know, to Councillor, you know, I totally get where Councillor Lumley's coming from, but, you know, he wouldn't hire a chef and then ask his chef to look after the squirrel system for his billing and process invoices and handle staff that are disgruntled. And in a similar sense, we're doing the same thing. We're hiring someone with a skill set to do a job, and then we're piling all the stuff on the corners of their desk and saying, oh, by the way, look after this as well. Like, as you said, you know, at the RD, sometimes there's 2 IT people in a board meeting just running the electronics of the meeting, slide presentations, share screening, what's up on the projection system, incoming phone calls for delegations and things. And that's all done by IT. That's not done by a CEO who's juggling all sorts of other stuff. So yeah, it's a tough one, but you know, if you're not operating efficiently, you're defeating your whole purpose, because and then what ends up happening, we don't retain staff, which is the other big thing, is people get burned out and they say, I've had enough of this little burg, I'm getting out of here. I can make more money in another community and I just have the one job. So, you know, it's a tough one.
Councillor D'Andrade, then I think we need to move on and make a motion.
Thank you. I understand the concerns that was raised, but one thing that my perspective is, this year we increased 20% already, right, in terms of senior staff. So
Oh, sorry.
no, okay, maybe that's a clarification. That my understanding is there was a 20% increase. So that I was wondering if this is on top of the 20%. So perhaps I'm reading wrong. But regardless, I think resources are finite. We are experiencing COVID, which you know, now we're gonna have to deal with taxes and more taxes, and the water is increasing. Everything, I can see my taxes increasing. And so I'm not saying, I totally understand that the corporate officer has been hired for a different reason. But again, what I would like to bring is the perspective of Councillor Lumley. So perhaps it's always good to have some external feedback, because we all get blind in our own world. And if we have never had this sort of efficiency assessment, this is the time to do. This is a good time to do, because we are just expanding, but our population is not growing that much, at least so far, we don't know. And now we're gonna be hit by police costing. So that's the nervousness that I get. I get it that we need more, we always need more, but how far are we gonna stretch?
I think the police cost is a good item, because this corporate officer is also going to be responsible for the policing group. I'd like to just not leave that hanging there at 20%. I don't see anywhere. I'm looking at the table on page 26, and I see that in 2020 we increased 2.15 positions, which would be less than 10%. And I'm not sure where the 20% comes from. I don't want to lose an impression to anybody. You said we increased 20%?
22.1. Perhaps I'm not reading properly. That's why I would like clarification from the Director of Finance. It could be that I.
Well, you just see the total FTEs at the bottom of the table on page 20, on page 26 for each year.
Mr. Mayor, on page 10 of the whole package, the first number, it's salary managers. It just increased 22%. Am I reading incorrectly?
That could just be an add in. You're looking at salaries, not positions. Okay. I thought you were talking positions. You were 20% in positions.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm talking about cost overall, right? So.
You'd have to take a look at what those positions are, sort of thing. Council Adwick?
I'll move this.
You'll move that we,
Yeah. I think there's workload. You need to fast enough to justify it. So I hear what Councilor Lumley's saying, but it's half an FTE. The workload that goes through this office is pretty phenomenal, actually. So
we established manager corporate services position and authorize staff to hire.
yeah, I'll move that.
Second by Councilor Crowell. Okay. Any further discussion? Councilor Diandrat?
Yeah, I would like to make a motion to have
We have a motion on the floor.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so after that, okay, I would like to, it's just for the performance review. I think it will be valuable.
Any further discussion on the motion on the floor to establish this position? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Okay. Okay. Was that recorded? Yeah, okay, recorded. Council Lumley opposed. Okay. Now, Councilor Diandrat, you had a second motion?
Yes, please. That we engage or at least put the budget for external review. I think is important to have. It doesn't hurt at all.
So we could ask staff to come back with a report on that and what that cost would be. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important. Everybody needs an outside perspective. It's healthy. Good companies always do that. So.
Yayo?
It would be helpful to have some sort of scope, reviewing what portion of the corporation or the whole thing, or services or costs or efficiencies, or what is it? It would be helpful to have some sense of that. If you want to look at something specifically, or there's a particular standard you want, or alternatively, we could just look around what types of reviews are done for other communities and bring you some options and costs. That's another option.
Councilor Diandrat, do you have a specific in mind, or would you be okay with that?
I have been going through reviews. We're pretty much general. I think it will be, but obviously that could bear some costs. So if we could have a perspective of, okay, from the general to more specific, because I mean, not only service, but what do you encompass in service, right? It could be like, is it infrastructure service in service, planning service in service, or just certain services? So it's hard for me just to say. I think it's important because when we are internal, we get blind to a certain point. So when you get companies that are used to deal with a lot of municipalities and how people are doing things, it helps. It just brings new perspectives, and companies, leading corporations, they do that because they understand that you can always find efficiencies. Obviously, I understand that there's some cost involved. So I would just try to understand the cost involved, right? And then we can narrow down. But ideally, you do an overall.
Okay. You want to make a resolution, propose a resolution?
Yeah, that staff, well, we're not engaging a company. Perhaps I need some support but look at, it's pretty much performance auditing, right, of services operations and how you can maximize efficiency, right?
The last one I did or was involved with was District of Seashell, and that was $100,000 plus to do an
Okay.
organization. So, yeah, so.
Oh, it's a salary of one person sometimes.
Do we have a seconder for that, first of all, to get staff to provide a report on what options are available to conduct a review? Yeah.
Review of what, like specifically? What are we're reviewing the in-town staffing procedures? Is that what we're reviewing? Like,
Usually when you do these reviews, you look at operational, right? Operational. How can you find effectiveness in the way the company is established, right? And that's when external people, they come and they understand how processes are being done, and they always find efficiency. So this is something. It's not a punitive thing. It's actually to increase effectiveness, right? Because we all get in our own realms, we learn how to do in a certain way, and you think that that's the best way. So that these are companies trained in doing these things, and they do with municipalities as well.
Councilor Kroll, you had your hand up? You're muted. There you are.
Thank you, sir. You know, I agree with what you said earlier about the cost. You know, a couple of the firms that I've been involved with went through these, and they're expensive. You know, it doesn't hurt to ask how much, but what you get for how much. But you know, we just had a huge discussion over a salary that we know is needed, and you know, now we're talking about spending probably as much or more than that salary. So I think we need to find out what it's going to cost. It's because they really are expensive.
CAO?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's just in the spirit of what Councilor D'Andrade was saying, just trying to narrow this down a little bit. I want to mention a couple of things. So we have reviews done, I wouldn't say on a regular basis, but on finances, the processes and our financial planning are reviewed yearly, as you know. Yeah. The treatment plant, for example, we have not just a culture, but it's one of the reasons that we hired Daniel in 2015. It was around efficiencies of our operations, and it was making sure that the town was spending the time on their priorities, primarily from an asset management perspective, and I think that's paid off relatively well. Now, what we haven't done is, do we have enough staff to do all the things that we need to be doing? Sort of from an HR type of review, I think the last time anything even close to that was done, and I was referencing that, was 2014 or 15. So that would be one way to sort of narrow that. If there's other type of review that's specific to, again, we're regulated from provincial agencies for all the aspects that we have, including our environmental performance from reporting and otherwise. So, if there's anything more specific, that's what I was trying to understand a little bit as well.
Councilor D'Andrade?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Perhaps if, for example, that's a good example, right? If the treatment plant went through some operational, so we are not talking about that. It just recently went, and I'm sure the company found whatever needed to be found. They engage. Perhaps it will be more administrative. How does the town is distributing? Things like that. Anyways, this is a suggestion that companies that are at the forefront, that with competition, they do this, and governments. I went through this my own self, and and it costs money. Yes.
Councilor Lumley?
Yeah, I'd like to second the motion put forward, like for efficiencies, but I mean, staff's going to come back with an idea of the report and what it might cost. Like we don't have to clinically name the report right now, but I think it's a good idea because you know what? We're also expanding the offices. Maybe somebody should also give us some perspective on how they think things should operate. Maybe our front desk is too small for the growing town. Maybe somebody should just come in and, maybe we have to overhaul some other things, like, some of the inefficiencies that staff are experiencing and putting under duress or extra work, they might be able to get ironed out with just some tweaks here and there. So, and with the new office coming open, I just think there's probably an opportunity to make things easier on people rather than harder. So, yeah, I'm seconding the motion.
Okay. CAO.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I don't want to intervene in your conversation, but just for a bit more context to try to understand. I think the process in Sechelt, one of the processes I went through was around the development process, reviewing that aspect of how the town processed those types of their aspect of their work. The other one opportunity is around sort of Excellence Canada. It's the National Quality Institute. They go through a more detailed review of the organization, and you basically get a rating. I think that's what companies use as a way to show their shareholders, in particular, that they're being externally audited on how they're doing their performance. And there are national standards for that type of performance. And but I think as a suggestion, and we understand what Council is saying, is we'll come back with a report that has some options, what type of scope and cost estimate, not a specific budget, I would imagine, sort of an order of magnitude on different areas that we can review our performance. That's just one of the suggestion there.
Okay, we have a recommendation that a motion to ask staff to bring back a report on options for conducting a review. Been moved and seconded. Councillor Ladwig.
Okay, Councillor Lumley's last comment there has converted me. So yeah, I will support this. I just wanted to add that maybe part of the report that we could look at conducting would be a bit of a comparative analysis, just with workload on staff compared to other sizable municipalities. I know that's like comparing apples to oranges. I understand each municipality is run differently, but some kind of comparative analysis to kind of see how whether our structure is putting added stress on individuals, like Councillor Lumley just suggested, or that kind of thing. I think incorporating a comparative analysis into this type of report would be interesting.
Yeah, I think we just need to give staff some. Right now, it's going to come back to us, because it's going to come back to us as a kind of some choices of options as to what we could do. And so we're going to have that to look at the next few weeks or months ahead, sort of thing. And then it could have to go to an RFP. So we will see that. So Councillor Dindred.
I just did a quick Google, and actually Nanaimo got engaged bottom-up operational and efficiency review. So that helps us. And bottom-up is really good because you're looking exactly at the people who are having the load. So probably this is a good example. Bottom-up operational and efficiency review. Okay, so let's
we've got a motion. We're going to ask staff to come back with a report, and then we can consider that, and then we can ensure that it meets that you've asked for. Okay, so all in favor? Okay, thank you. It's all approved, so we'll carry on. So thank you, and we have the staff in position. We'll now go on to staff report on the 2001 update to property tax implications of future policing costs once the town exceeds 5,000 population, and back to the Director of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this report, you remember, it's actually almost a year to the day, which is amazing. I presented a report at the March 10th budget meeting and provided the committee with information how taxation may be impacted by the change of when the town does reach a population of 5,000. And at that point, provided some options for phasing in additional costs And so I wanted to provide the committee with an updated information, just to provide some new information, same topic, but just refresh the information that you have. And so as noted in the previous report and the select committee report, that the implications of the town reaching a population of 5,000 are significant from a financial perspective. The additional cost will be estimated between $700,000 and $1 million per year. So I've provided an updated example of how the increased taxation could be phased in. And the percentages I've provided in this scenario are just for illustrative purposes only. Just to give you a starting point or just a review discussion. And this also recognizes that there was no taxation option available in 2020 due to the COVID pandemic. Council had originally intended to put some funds aside. I was able to put some aside, but council's intent was to start this process last year. But unfortunately, the pandemic really threw everybody off our plans. So as mentioned, the scenario is provided on page 3 of my report, and the estimated impact on the average property for 2021 under that scenario would be $53 for the average residential property, an additional $231 for the average commercial property. But it's important to note that if council does choose to start implementing increased taxation to start making a buffer, that if the 2021 census deems that the town's population is less than 5,000, any funds that are collected for this purpose would go into a reserve, and this will be set aside until the funds are required. And then if we do pass that magic point without tipping into 5,000, then council at the time can extend. They have more time to extend the phase-in options. So yeah, so the info provided today is just for your consideration as to how you might want to tackle this issue at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Director of Finance. One thing we haven't seen, of course, yet on the budget is the capital, and whether capital is going to be funded from taxation or reserves or grants or a combination thereof. So we don't know what the increase to taxation will be yet as a result of capital costs. So that's something that we need to bear in mind. I certainly still like the idea of trying to build up that reserve. On the other side, I'm preparing a report to council that I want to submit to the province, and that would be relative to this whole business of reaching 5,000 population. But and the policing level. I don't know what the policing level is for our community for an adequate level of policing. It has not changed here since 2009, so that we need to look at that. What's council's wish? You want to bring this forward at a later date, or you want to deal with it now? After we've seen capital. Councilor D'Andrade?
I feel we don't have a choice. It's something that we have to face. That's almost a non-option. So it's better to start building up something. I mean, we're going to have a shock anyways. My concern is if we don't do this year, then next year could be even worse. So, I mean, obviously we don't want to increase anything this year, but it's almost like, you know, unless a miracle happens that we're not going to increase the population, we're going to be faced by this issue. So.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. My concern is just a number. We're already 2%. If capital is another 2% or 3%, and then we add 5%, then we're up to 10% increase in budget. Is that where we want to go? Because it'll hit everybody across the board. So not knowing capital, I'm a little uncertain as to how much of we want to build for a policing reserve. So, Councillor Crowell?
Last year at this time, I believe we put 2% into the budget, and then the COVID lockdown hit and it was panic and nobody was going to be able to pay their taxes. So we pulled the 2%. You know, sooner or later, we're going to have to pay the piper, whether it's in 2022 or 2024, it's going to happen. You know, we pulled the 2% last year. Councillor Lumley was on the committee for the policing, and I don't think the report that they sort of generated looking at it wasn't a particularly robust police department that they were envisioning when the report was done. The other thing that, nobody wants to talk about, and it really is going to be probably the long-term elephant in the room, is the federal government's been handing out piles of money. The provincial government's been handing out piles of money. Who ultimately is going to end up paying back those piles of money? So right now, the money's coming our way federally and provincially for things. If we can get a bit ahead of the game before the province and the feds decide, oh, wait a minute, we've got to start trying to recovering some of these lavish expenses we've been handing out. So I think, we need to sort of bite the bullet now. If we have to trim back later, so be it. But we are going to be hit with, provincially and federally increases in personal income tax and taxes to the province, because, as my mom used to say, money doesn't grow on trees. And, soon, and, it's, and I really appreciate the length the Director of Finance has gone to in her table on page 29 of the agenda. It breaks it down really, really clearly to, how we can get ahead of it. So I'm certainly in support of it at this point, and if we have to pull it once capital hits, so be it. But or reduce the amount. But I think we need to start moving forward.
Councillor Lumley?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Mr. Mayor, but I think one thing that we have to do, or at least understand and try as hard as we can to make every community member understand, is this can't be lumped in with running the town. This is nothing to do with running the town. This is just everything to do with a provincial mandate for policing. This is, the committee met with two really high profile people in the province one day, and there's just really nothing, as many questions, or you could say pro rata, you could do this, you could do that. It doesn't really matter. Like the fact that our town could be 5,020 people, it's $1 million, right? So as unfair as that is, I think, we have to do it. And then we have to make sure everybody knows your taxes didn't go up 15%. Your taxes, the town, these are your taxes for the town. And this is just purely a reserve for policing fund. And it's going to be more. So, communication would be the key. The only thing, I think the report's excellent. Thank you to the Director of Finance for again laying this out. I would just swap this year 2 and year 3. I would swap 22 and 23 just to give it a more graduating, go 5, 10, 15, and then make that really clear to everybody that this chunk of your tax bill is these are funds that you're going to have to pay indefinitely, for the rest of your time in Gibsons, because that's what it is to pay for police. So those are my thoughts.
Councillor Lumley, or Ladwig, sorry.
Just ditto to what Councillor Lumley just said. I agree. It's just a reality. It's where we're at. And, we can spread it out and try to ease the pain. At the end of the day, as far as I know, people's salaries and wages don't go up at the same rate as the cost of living anyway. So this is what it is. This is our reality. I say we move forward.
Okay, well, is there a recommendation? There's not a recommendation on the report, so it has to come from one of us as to what do you want to do? Do you want to do 5% in 2021 to establish a policing reserve? Councillor Lumley, you move that? You're okay. I want to hear you say it.
Yes, I move that.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Kroll. Recognizing that if we want to roll that back, the other thing you see, reason I say I want to know where we are relative to capital is we still have $130,000 or a bit less than that now, $120,000 left on surplus. We could actually, if we don't have a big capital charge against that surplus, we can attach the surplus to this as well, sort of thing. So that it's a number we have to come to grips with this year. It's just what is that number? But yeah, but go ahead, Councillor Kroll.
I certainly hear what you're saying, and I appreciate the fact that you're trying to soften the blow, but sooner or later,
Not softening the blow. We're going to hit the blow.
Yeah.
We're going to
So
either
if we're more prepared for it, then so be it.
we're either going to pay it now in straight taxation, or it's a combination of taxation and surplus. Surplus being right now, our surplus at about $120,000 is 4% of taxation. So that if we assign that surplus, we'd be the same financial position. We just wouldn't hit it as a tax. We'd hit it as a surplus. So that's all I say. I do agree we have to do it. I mean, I wish the prior council had actually started the process, because some communities do that. They start 5 years ahead or 4 years ahead, as suggested here. But I'm okay as long as we understand that we can revisit this number if we need to. Under COVID, I'm just reluctant to hit the businesses and everybody else with a big number this year again. And because this is going to increase everybody's taxes, not just the residential. Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Councillor Ladwig, did you want to speak to the motion?
I just really wanted to emphasize Councillor Lumley's point about communication on this. I think it is really critical. And so I wanted to emphasize that.
Okay. This is a recommendation to council, so this will come back to you next week. So you have time to think about it. Councillor Kroll?
Just further to what Councillor Lumley was saying, I think it is important when this is communicated out that, it is something sort of, well, I guess growth is within our control, but in a sense it's beyond our control. And it's a trickle down to the municipality from the province. So I think it's really important that it become blatantly clear when this is communicated out, that it isn't just the town saying, wow, here's an opportunity, we can increase taxes by 5% and call it policing. It's something we're literally being told we have to do. It's out of our wheelhouse.
Okay, I see no further hands up for discussion. All in favor? Yeah. Okay, that passes. Thank you. Okay, and here's where we get to talk about the tax multiple now and the tax burden analysis. So the next report, annual tax rates, business tax multiple, and tax burden analysis. Go back to the Director of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the purpose of this report is to provide information on the town's preliminary business tax multiple and the tax burden. And this is for the committee's review. And so the information I'm presenting today is based on the completed roll from BC Assessment. And it's being just prepared at this point just to receive direction in advance of setting the property tax rates. The revised roll, which are the finalized assessments, are provided by BC Assessment in late March. And so the town's financial plan includes several objectives, and one of which has been to ensure that there's an appropriate tax burden of Class 6 businesses as compared to Class 1, which is residential. And to meet this objective, the town has previously focused on reducing the business tax multiple each year. And so Table 1 shows the history of the Class 1 and Class 6 tax rates per thousand of assessed value and the corresponding tax multiple, the business tax multiple, and this is back since 2006. And so you remember last year that council, while you approved the overall 2.2% tax increase, it included the tax shift, and that reduced the multiple at that time, which was 2.976, and it reduced it down to 2.75. And so the preliminary rates, and this is again based on the completed roll assessed values, shows that this year the business tax multiple is sitting at 2.799. And so if no shift took place, any approved tax increase would be applied evenly across all to all property taxes or classes. If council was looking to see the business tax multiple remain near steady at the 2.75, then you need to have a tax shift. And in this case, and again, this is an example based on the 2% tax increase that was provided as part of the base budget, this would allocate 2.28 to residential and then only 0.8 to business. But, you know, part of the conversation about this really is to have a look at the tax burden. And so because this is given the effect that the relative changes on the assessment make on the multiplier. So it's helpful just to look at the burden as well. So if you go over to page 3 of my report, table 2 shows the distribution of taxes by property classes for 2019, 2020, and 2021. And what I've done is I've showed 2021, the business tax multiple that came across naturally as part of the completed roll. So it's sitting at 2.99. And then I did an example of what it would look like if there was a tax shift down closer to the 2.75. And so you can see that the trend, if we look at just the, well, you look at it all, the trend shows that the portion of taxes collected from class 6 as compared to class 1 has been decreasing each year, which is consistent with the objective in the plan. But so pending any significant changes in the revised roll, this trend will continue, and that's even without a tax shift if council wants to do that. So what I'm saying is that even at the both business tax multiple of 2.799, class 6 versus class 1 tax burden will be reduced as compared to last year. If council wants to go a bit further and go down to a business tax multiple that is aiming for that 2.75, that would be shifting about $9,000 from commercial to residential. So at this point, the information is being provided just to get the committee's feedback on what type of shift, if any, you want to see. And this would be barring any significant changes coming in from the revised roll. Is the committee happy as long as you're seeing a reduction of commercial versus a shift in the burden, or do you want to go a bit further and target a specific multiple? So I'm bringing that forward now to get some direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Helpful to have those tables, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Council, where would you like to go with this? Yeah, Councilor Ledwig.
I support it as presented, I think.
Support, what one would you support? The 2.799 or the 2.758?
7.9.
7.9, yeah. Others? Councilor Lumley?
I'm just going to ask Councillor Ladwig why she wants to go up for businesses. From last year. Like, is there a reason? Do you want to increase the business tax?
No,
the goal of council, as far as I knew, was to meet like a lower, even lower than 2.75. But I mean, being as it is, I just wondered why you wanted it to be higher.
It's not that I wanted to be higher per se. I was looking at the average for going back to 2006, and it seemed like a comfortable place to sit. But if you think that sitting at 2.75 because that's what we did last year is a more appropriate number, then I'm open to talking about that. I was just looking at the average over like I said, go back 10 years. It seems like a reasonable.
Okay, and just the only other thing I'd add to this discussion, Mr. Mayor, is that we did just review how the proportionate share of the policing costs is quite higher than a residential cost too. So that's why I'm just saying, look, why go up? Why not keep it around what we had last year for businesses? Because they're going to pay like way more than residentials on the reserve eventually when it's introduced.
Can I?
Councillor Ludwig, go ahead.
Well, just, I mean, I thought we went through this last year and, you know, had comparables done across different communities. In fact, we're sitting very consistently with other communities. In fact, if not in the lower side of the multiplier for businesses compared relative to other communities. Don't get me wrong, Councillor Lemay, I actually usually lean on you on this conversation because you are in business and I wholeheartedly want to support our small local businesses here in Gibson. So it's not like I'm fixed on this. Just to me, it seemed like a reasonable number to be sitting at relative to other communities, relative to what's been going on for the past number of years. But I put my 2 cents out there and I'll leave it at that for now.
Councillor Kroll?
Personally, you know, in light of the sort of beating that a lot of businesses that have taken over the past year, and we did, I think there was some COVID consideration, sort of not knowing what businesses were going to be faced with and what their ability to pay taxes is. And you just have to drive around the community and, you know, it's blatantly apparent that there are fewer businesses. So I would move that we keep it at the 2020 level and not increase it for this for the coming year.
Mr. Mayor, if I may jump in.
Yes, go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you. So I just want to just draw committee's attention back to table 2. So if you look at the percentages I have highlighted, so in 2020, residential as a burden allocation paid 70.87% of overall taxes, the ratio. Businesses paid 26.96. Then if you look to your left, and there's a business tax multiple of 2.799. So even though the multiple has gone up, if you look at the percentages, you're going to see that residential is actually paying a little bit more. They're now at 71.07%, and businesses are a little bit less at 26.68. So even without the tax multiple shift, there is, because of the assessment changes, there is already a slight reallocation of the burden. And I was thinking maybe I should read my report to focus on the burden as opposed to the multiple, because it can be quite confusing. And really, so I think you have comfort in knowing that even if you don't do a shift, there's still that allocation of burden is still shifting a bit more to residential than commercial, just based on the changes in relative assessment between the two. And unless there's a significant adjustment in the revised rule, I would expect that trend to stay status quo. So hopefully that helps the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kroll?
And I certainly appreciate the Director of Finance's clarification, because I should have realized, looking at the table, based on the assessment, obviously businesses didn't experience the same rise in assessed value that the residential component did. So valid point. And thank you for the clarification.
Yeah. So that was a tough one, that ratio right. Councillor Ludwig?
I'm always doing this with residential, so I'm going to try it with business. Can somebody walk me through what these numbers would mean to it? And I know, again, so many different businesses, but like, what would this mean to you possibly, Councillor Lumley, as a business owner? Like, what would this percentage mean in real numbers?
Councillor Lumley?
I can guarantee you last year when we set it at 2.75, it helped a lot of people out. It was, it helped, you know, it was a significant savings just due to the, I think what happens is, I mean, due to the and we can see it right now, even the businesses, it's not like your income goes up, but when your real estate values go up, and like, you know, 2-bedroom homes are being sold for $800,000 on Tricklebrook Lane. It doesn't mean that, you know, that I'm making more money or any business is making more money. But hopefully in the same instance, I think that's why I like to set it at like if you pick a ratio, like if our council or this town wants to pick a ratio and just stick with it. Because I understand like the numbers, you can look at the numbers like several ways, like a proportionate share of tax is one way. But again, like businesses aren't, you know, I can't realize a $300,000 gain in one real estate cycle and flip my business. I just have to pay tax, and then you can see on the policing table, you're going to pay $53 this year, and I'm going to pay $251 this year for policing, right? So I just kind of like to see it stay at 2.75, and it's not a big difference, but it's just consistent, like that every business knows every year that's going to be their tax multiplier. Like it's not going to move up and it's not going to move down, but at least they'll know. And progressively, what gets hidden in these numbers is that as the town grows and as there's more businesses created, like say the industrial land on Industrial Way, like those are going to be commercial properties. There's already 2 commercial businesses operating up there. I mean, that's going to skew the proportional share of taxes because businesses are being added. It doesn't make it any bit easier on a flower shop in Lower Gibsons because there's more taxes being paid. Like, I don't know, do you know what I'm saying? Like, that's why I just like to see the multiplier the same because it affects every business the same. It affects a business with 2 people, it affects a business with 10 people. Of course, a new business coming in that employs 10 people, their proportionate share of the taxes will be higher. Well, it will be, it's a bigger business, right? So that's all I'm saying. If we could just say, let's just stick with 2.75, and as businesses grow in the area, the proportionate share of taxes will grow on top of it, right? So that's just my viewpoint.
I think it also helps to encourage business to come. We have to, in some sense, remain competitive as a community, and to encourage businesses to get started and to grow in our community is important because businesses provide jobs, and without those jobs, we don't have the residents to be able to pay the other taxes. So that we're supporting both sides coin. Councilor Andrade, you haven't spoken yet, so.
Yeah, I think I would take the approach, let's maintain this year how it was, and then next year we evaluate because we don't know what's going to be next year. Instead of just saying maintain this number, okay, next year we have another conversation. But I understand. Business have been hard, really bad. People have been hit too, but at least there's a little bit of balance in this community. If you get retired people, probably they have not been hitting that much. So in this regard, I have a sympathy with, even though last year I fiercely defend the tax. I think what is hard for me to see is how much more. I think last year, Director of Finance, if you could help us. I remember last year there was like, okay, a house of around, the comparison, the same way you did with the police, around 600 something and $1 million would increase more or less this with this 275 as opposed as the other one. So at least we, as council, I feel a little bit more confident. So in principle, I do support the 275, but I still don't know what it means in terms of, if you could give us some light here at the end of the tunnel.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if you would like. Yes, thank you, Councillor D'Andrade. So that information, I was on the fence about providing it at this point because it is a preliminary. We're still dealing with the completed role. So my intent to bring this to council right now is to get a feel for if you're aiming for that 2.75, and it sounds like the group is, and if you do choose to do that, that's really helpful information for me. And what I will then do is when I give you, when we get closer to the end of, once council has approved the final tax increases, and I have the revised roll, then I can provide the sample tax notices, and you can see the shift of the multiple there. So it's coming.
Yeah, I'm looking for a resolution. Councillor Ladwood, can you help?
No, I had a question. Okay, well, Councillor Lumley maybe, anyways, I'm wondering why the multiplier does change. Why does it fluctuate the way it does, and why not just be consistent?
Okay, Director of Finance, you want to respond?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the multiplier automatically changes every year because of based on changes in assessment. If assessed values for residential and commercial went up identically, then there would be no change, but it's relative to the two. And so that's why it keeps shifting around. And that's why in some ways it's helpful to look at the burden as well, because you're looking at overall percentages, but it does shift every year. And it's because of the relative changes to assessment in the two classes, property classes.
All right.
Councillor Kroll?
I was prepared to move that we accept the 2020 level of 2.7.
2.758?
Yes.
Okay. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Lumley, okay. Further discussion? Councillor Dindrad?
Just a clarification, Mr. Mayor. So we will vote now, but the Director of Finance will bring back, and we will still have some room if we found, whatever, if we perceive that it's too much burden in one in another. So, or we are making a final decision right now. Just a clarification.
Final decision is a recommendation to council. So you will see it next week again, but there's always the opportunity to revisit the numbers in the budget as we go forward.
Okay.
Until it's adopted in the bylaw, because it comes to us in the final form in a bylaw. So. Okay, mover, seconder for 2.758. All in favor? Thank you. And I think that's a good move. I think that's a good message also to the business community that we'll keep working with them. Okay, now we're into the final report, the property tax framework and general tax scheme collection. And here we have a recommendation. And the recommendation is effective 2021 tax year. The town once again follow the general tax scheme as outlined in the community charter. Director of Finance, would you comment on this, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the purpose of this report is to provide an update on the temporary property taxation related measures that the province put in place for 2020 and outline how this applies to 2021. So last year, in response to the COVID pandemic, the province implemented some temporary measures that they called the property tax framework, and it applied to 2020 only. And it included a legislated penalty date of October 1st, and that was for specific classes, mostly relating to different business classes and recreation / not-for-profit. They also, so that was basically, it was a penalty date change. And so there was no change made to the due date, which is remained at July 2nd, or the penalty date for classes 1, 2, and 3, and that's residential, utilities, and housing. And they also did not change the penalty percentage, which is 10%. So, but because the province made that change, the town had to enact an alternate scheme for taxation to make sure we were conform with the framework, because they were going outside of the general framework. And council at the time also provided some relief to class 1 and class 2 by implementing an alternate tax scheme for 5% of the tax penalty scheme, which is 5% on July 3rd and 5% on October 1st. So basically splitting that 10% into two different staggered dates. And so council also at that point, which was an option last year, was to defer the annual tax sale to 2021. And that provided some additional relief as well to owners and helped avoiding also confusion with a delayed penalty date for certain property taxes as related to the tax sale process. Last year, from a taxation point of view, it was there was a lot going on, frankly. So I wanted to clarify that those were for 2020 only, and just get some direction for how council wants to proceed for 2021. And so the province has indicated that they're not going to be doing similar measures in place this year unless they do some last minute legislative change, which I've not had any indication they're planning on doing. And so my recommendation is that the town also then revert back to the general tax scheme has been applied historically. And so for 2021, the due date is July 2nd. This is followed by a 10% penalty applied to anything unpaid as of the next day, which is July 3rd. And my reasons for that is that the collection scheme, it supports our cash flow requirements as we, for municipal purposes, and make sure that we have funds in place to cover our remittances to other agencies, because we have to remit those regardless of how many taxes we have collected, with the exception of school taxes. But the RD one, we have to make that payment regardless. There's also no duplication of the penalty calculation processes on our end. So it's a one-time, so no duplication of staffing time, so it's more efficient. It's also much more straightforward to communicate. It's been our historical approach, and it helps us. This year, we're going to have a significant change from taxation point of view in terms of how the homeowner grant is claimed. And I would like to focus all of our communication efforts on that, aside from the budget, of course, to support the homeowners in the transition of how to claim their homeowner grant. And it's also consistent with how the neighboring SRD rural areas are, how their taxes are applied. So my recommendation is that the general scheme basically revert back to our historical approach, but I do want to get council's feedback. And so this is part of the annual tax rates bylaw. This section is included in that bylaw coming up. Thank you.
Thank you. I think council understands this. I personally like the idea. I'm not uncomfortable with anything else in terms of reverting back to the collection date and everything else. I think that's appropriate. I actually like to split penalty, the 5% with an additional 5% added for outstanding as of October the 1st. But I think that just gives a little bit of a relief to some people who are struggling maybe to make that initial tax payment or make the full tax payment initially. And I know that regionally, so there are some communities who have that in place on an ongoing basis. And I don't, I actually like that. I think it's fair to our taxpayers. But I'll hear from council. Who would like to start? Councilor D'Andrade, you're first.
I'll support Mayor what you have said. It's, I think that even though the government's not giving anything, people are gonna be the people who have been affected the most. It's not a miracle way out, so I don't mind. And I think for good faith, we can still. I don't remember. Did we give any incentive for anyone that paid in advance or something? But just ask to support people who can pay in advance, and for the people who are struggling, there's some support.
I don't believe we have any incentive on taxes. We just have different opportunities for them to pay in advance to spread it out during the year. By Councilor Ladwig, you had your hand up.
Did many people take advantage of that change last year?
Director of Finance.
Interestingly enough, we had a really strong payment of property taxes last year. I was quite concerned about what the impact on cash flow was going to be. And we had really, really strong returns. Most people paid their taxes on time. No one wants to incur a penalty, either if it's 5 or 10. So those that could pay, paid. And so historically we get about, over the last 10 years, it averages about 8% are outstanding as of the tax due date. And that was slightly higher last year, only from the commercial point of view, because their penalty date was later. So they had the legislative option to delay, which they did, of course, which was the point. But no, we didn't really see a change from a return. So no, and there is no legislative option to provide a discount for taxes paying early. I would like to make a comment though, if council is choosing to split the 5 and 5, that the second date be consistent with Sechelt, because if October 1st was a province initiated date and it's actually after the tax sale, which is the day before, and it would really complicate the process. So part of the reason I prefer the one-time 10% is once the due date is over, we then go into the legislative tax sale process. And part of that is communicating what the minimum amount is and what the upset price is, and not by that point, as of July 5th, I know exactly what the number is. It's not going to change. If there's a second penalty date later, then that sort of throws a bit of confusion in there. But if council does want to go down the splitting road, then and Seashell uses August. The penalty date is anything unpaid after August 31st. So it would be basically effective September 1st. And that at least gives a bit more leeway between the tax sale process. It does still make it complicated, but it's not, it's October 1st would be very problematic. So yeah.
She'll have a 5 and 5 as well.
They do, yeah.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. I think that doing a similar thing, there is to say, there are other communities throughout the province that do that. Give that's the incentive, pay now and 5% penalty, pay later, and you get a 10% penalty. So that, and I appreciate there's a little bit more of an extra administrative process there, but I'm thinking also of the residents and the taxpayers. So that I'm comfortable with that, but no other changes. Councilor Kroll, you would, I'm going to say Councilor DeAndrade, would you move that?
Yeah, I'll move that. I was waiting for you to move.
September 1st penalty date then for the second 5%.
Mhm.
And Councilor Kroll second that. I'm sorry, Director of Finance, I think you're probably going to lose on this one. So
That's quite all right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the direction early. It helps because we will be printing tax notices soon, and we needed this information for that. So thank you.
I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for all your work on this whole file, Director of Finance. It's always a complicated time. And you make it, again, as we've expressed in the past, easier for us to understand the process. So we are now at the end of this agenda. We're going to go to inquiries and invite anybody who has the staying power to have stayed with us to ask a question.
If there's anyone in attendance who would like to ask a question, please hit the raise your hand button at the bottom of your screen, and I will let you into the meeting so you can speak to council. We have a Mr. William Baker.
Thank you. Mr. Baker, welcome. You can find your unmute button. Mr. Baker, you're still muted.
All right, now I'm unmuted.
Got it, yeah.
Mayor and Council, good afternoon. It has been an intense afternoon of discussion of budgeting and so forth, but it hasn't really gotten down to the individual line items. I've seen somewhere a timetable for what is going to be happening on the budget, but I don't see anywhere in there where we'll be able to actually have a conversation about the budget. I see, the inquiry period is always a 2-minute maximum, not nearly enough time to have an actual conversation. So I have been pitching my questions, but there are some policy issues that I would really like to have a conversation about.
The presentation on the budget and the discussion on the budget as we go through this process, that I don't have the timetable in front of me. I'm sorry. Director of Finance, you recall when the public meeting is planned for?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. So I've got, let me see, aside from the inquiries and the opportunity to approach council in between the meetings, the final budget open house is late-ish April. It is quite late in the process though, but it's April 20th around there, but it really depends on the next couple of meetings as to where those land.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But there are also the opportunities, Mr. Baker, to either submit information or, as you say, on the inquiries. They are, I understand there are long meetings, but it's a process we go through, and we are here.
Okay, so I'm not sure what what kind of direction that is. Yes, there are inquiries at the end of council meetings, but they are very limited in terms of time frame. And it's not, it's a conversation that may take 30 to 60 minutes to get through, and it's a conversation as opposed to a presentation of what's already been decided. And I was hoping to be able to have an opportunity to just discuss those. Now, I can do it offline, I guess, with individual counselors, but there may be some areas that might be useful, not just for me, but for others who are interested in this budgeting process, to have more of an interactive budget discussion as opposed to one that tends to be more one way.
Yeah. Well,
Is there something that we can do to affect that?
well, let's think about that. I certainly don't mind having a kind of a public discussion. We could have try to set an evening where we're still early in the budget process. We haven't gotten into capital at all yet. So we're just proceeding through the process. So yeah, there's an opportunity, and maybe we can talk to the CAO and Director of Finance to see if we can't find an opportunity for a budget discussion.
That would be most appreciated, because I think, there are some very bright people in this town, and you're looking for things, for efficiencies, and some of those suggestions may come forward. I do applaud Council D'Andrade for her attempt to get a review. I think that's an excellent idea, and I particularly want to applaud Councillor Lumley for observing that we seem to be expanding and expanding. We now have another building, we have more employees, and I think we got to look at our growth and assess, where we are. How do we right size for our current community? But those are discussions that I'd like to have, but they're clearly not within the scope of an inquiry at the end of a long meeting. So
you're right about that. Yeah. So, well, let's take a look at that. We'll talk outside this meeting and look for that opportunity that we can actually have take a stop and have a process of talking about the process and some of the issues that we're grappling with. We're residents here too, all of us.
I have a lot of sympathy for council. It is a big budget. There are 600 line items in the just in the operations budget, and then there's the capital budgets, and then there's a 5-year, and then there's a 5-year forecasting, and it's a big loaf of bread to swallow in one chunk. So God bless you for all of you for putting your minds to it. Anyway, yes, if we can get another roundtable budget discussion, that would be my preference.
Right. Thank you. We'll come back to you on that. Thank you. Other inquiries?
Just one moment. We do have another one. It's just taking me a moment here to let someone in. We have a Miss Woodruff.
Yeah. Sophie, welcome.
Thank you. Just a quick question. I understand that council received a letter from the Sunshine Coast Homelessness Advisory Committee about preventing evictions. I did receive a reply from CAO Mikado, and just wanted to, but it wasn't clear to me whether that was going to be discussed at this meeting or if the press would be getting a response from the question later today. I can repeat the question if that's helpful.
No, I appreciate that. And no, we won't be responding at this meeting, maybe later today or tomorrow.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Further questions?
I don't see any other hands raised.
Okay. Okay, so we are going now to our closed meeting, and we have a motion to recommendation the meeting be closed in accordance with sections 91 F I of the Community Charter, law enforcement. If the council considers that that discloses or reasonably could be expected to harm the conduct of investigation under or enforcement of an indictment, and receipt of advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communication necessary for that purpose. Motion to Councillor Lumley, thank you. And Councillor Crowell, thank you. All in favor? Thank you very much. We'll give everybody a 5-minute break, and Rebecca will clear the boards and make sure we're not live on YouTube, and